Welcome to today's conversation. My name is Lindsay Young, and I'm the president of Aspens Media. Aspens Media, I think most of those attending live know who we are, but for those that are not attending live, we help businesses, primarily in distribution markets, tell their stories and share their expertise. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, just throw those in the chat. On the right or down below in the middle, wherever it is on your screen. I will either ask as I get them, or I'll leave time for Q&A at the end. I would love to hear all your questions, so you're not just stuck listening to me talk the whole time. But those listening in on our podcast, Attract, Engage, Grow, or on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's talk about building your content calendar to support your 2025 sales and marketing efforts. Today, I'm just going to share some of my content strategy and planning best practices, what's worked for me, what's worked for Aspens over the years. I hope you can take some inspiration and apply it to your own planning. So let's go ahead and start by defining what I mean by content. If you're here, I assume you understand the value of content as fuel for sales and marketing teams, about the importance of creating a website that reflects your expertise, and that for marketing to work well to help drive sales, that you can't really operate in a vacuum. We often see, though, that content plans have a good start, but then after a couple of months, content creation can take a back seat, in part because it's not prioritized by the rest of the team. In part, it's because you don't necessarily have the budget or executive support, or in part because a marketing person, especially someone who's on their own, is being stretched in 500 directions. So we're going to hopefully encourage you to at least start small and build from there today, so that you can kind of make 2025 your year. So as you can see, I've shared this slide in past webinars. I've shared the slide on social. We're not just talking about building a blog plan here. We're talking about building a content plan to support sales and marketing efforts. So that can include any one of these items: blogs, website content, podcasts, facts, Q&As, original research, catalogs are even part of the content bucket, guest posts, that would be placing articles in industry publications, social media, online learning, press releases. Everything on this list and more is considered content. I think the key here, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again probably a million times, is to make sure that the content you're creating, whatever the format, is valuable to the customer, relevant to the customer, their industry, their position, where they are in the journey, and consistent in both tone and message and in frequency. The thing is, if you're small or if you have a small team, I think, even though you might be stretched in a lot of different directions because of how the world works today, because we have platforms that are cheap or free to post on, you can do this at least as well, if not better, for your audience than your larger, more well-resourced competitors, especially if you're in a niche. You can go deeper, provide more specific resources, and you have subject matter expertise in your team, either in-house or in your network. So I want you to take advantage of that, because too many of your competitors are going generic, right? They don't have a method to their madness. So hopefully I can introduce some ideas today about how you can add a little bit more method to your madness so that you can build a content plan that actually works. Let's dive into how you can do that. Ask. This is a gross oversimplification probably, but I feel like it's a good way to think about this. What are your business goals? Identify what do your target customers under those business goals actually care about? What are their pain points? What are they thinking about? And then create relevant, valuable insights that support them. Simple, right? I mean, we all know it's not that simple, but that's what we're going to go over today. I think the point is that, and I think you're catching on to this, your customers have to be at the center of any plan that you build. This is about building trust and credibility. Again, there's too much content out there that's not helpful. that sounds just like everyone else and that overlooks the customer. So make sure that during the planning process and the execution of that planning process that you're constantly making sure your customers are at the center. This is, again, about trust and credibility. So let's take a closer look at some of the foundational elements of building the right content plan. Again, I'm going to try to keep things pretty simple in terms of what you need. So the first thing I'm going to say is you need to understand your business goals. This seems obvious, right? But if you don't understand where your business is going, and what you want to accomplish, then it's really hard to create content that can support those goals and to drive sales and marketing efforts. So for example, are you looking to grow in specific markets? Are you looking to increase the profitability of customers? Are you looking to expand the depth of a particular product line within your markets? Do you want to move to a more consultative sales model so that you can move beyond price as an option? Are you looking for more brand awareness? You're looking to grow wallet share, aka selling more to your existing customers? Are you looking to embed yourself as a partner in your customers, such as through vendor managed inventory or other services? These are all things that it's a really good for the marketing team to know. So if you don't know, you need to find out before you can build a content plan that your sales reps will leverage, that your team will embrace. The second thing that you're going to need to build the right content plan is customer and customer-facing team member input. And this is both upfront and ongoing conversation. I'm going to share a few questions and thoughts that I have just to get you kind of started. But, we like to, ideally, we like to interview multiple customers when we're building a content plan or a strategy for our clients. So we're talking about, talking to customers, not calling them and being like, what do you want to read about? What do you want to watch videos about? No, talking to them and getting to know them and understanding how business is going. What are their biggest challenges right now? What are their opportunities that they see in the market? What's hard about their job? What are they measured on? And then, and of course, talk about the products that you're offering and the relationship you have. But your goal here is to really get to know them as a person and get to know them as a role so that you can better understand what type of content or what kind of support you can provide that's going to engage them and bring them into the fold, so to speak, and support them in their jobs, because again, it has to be all about the customer. So talking to customers is a really valuable input to any content plan. We also like to talk to subject matter experts on your team. And by subject matter expert, I mean, you probably have if you're a distributor, you might have a technical specialist, right, that really understands a very specific market and a very specific product line. Talk to them. Find out what are the most frequent questions you're getting from your customers. What are they talking about? What services are you providing to them? What's stopping them from buying? What are the objections that they get? So really kind of dig in. Now, what I don't want you to do is come to either of these conversations asking them, what should we write about? That's not their job. I want you to talk to them about what they're hearing, what their take is on the market, what their take is on what the customer is struggling with, what the customer is excited about. That's all really good data to feed your content plan. The third thing, again, we're trying to keep things simple, so kind of 3 legs to a stool, I guess, is SEO. Okay. Now, this is often viewed as kind of a website thing. So where does most of your content live, right? Where do buyers go? Frequently these days, they go there first before they even talk to you. So the content that we're creating, much of it ends up living on your website, right? Much of it is what's driving engagement on your website, or it should, otherwise you're doing it wrong. So SEO can play a valuable role doing the research required to understand how to optimize your website and your content for visibility online can play a really important role in helping you inform your content plan. It shouldn't be the only input, but there's a lot of great data that you can leverage out of that process to drive ideas and better understand your customer. So in addition to understanding how people are getting to your site, what they're most interested in there, you can also use the process that you go through for SEO, keyword research, competitor analysis, to better understand and identify what people are actually searching for, which is a great way to understand the questions and the topics they're most interested in. It can also give you insight into where they're going, what they're reading, what others are publishing on that topic. Again, competitor analysis is always part of that process, and it's really good to spend a lot of time looking at competitors or other people that have expertise in the areas that you want to talk about, because it can not only give you ideas, maybe for what you can do a better job with or for what others are talking about, but it can also just give you insight of what your customers are looking for and what they're reading about. That said, there's a flip side, of course, right? Again, SEO and the keyword research that you do shouldn't be it, right? Like you bring to that conversation internal expertise, something that's unique to you. You're the differentiator, and you can make content, videos, articles, case studies, white papers, and so on and so forth, that goes beyond what everybody else is writing. You're combining the input or insight you can get from doing keyword research, analysis, that side of things, understanding what your customers are looking for online, with your expertise to kind of come together for a full picture and a plan that can be effective for the markets that you're targeting. So what else do you need to know? So here's some other questions that kind of go into a content strategy. And the reason I'm spending time on this is because you have to have a foundation before you build a plan, right? You have to know the answers to these questions before you can create a plan and identify topics and put them into a calendar. You have to, otherwise what you're creating is just going to be scattershot. So here's some other questions that we like to answer. What makes you different? This goes to the core of your messaging. But understanding this can help you identify tone, angle for the content that you're creating, what you should focus on and what you shouldn't focus on, that sort of thing. For example, we work with a consultant that really takes has a lot of practical experience in the area that he is an expert in. And so what makes him different is he has a lot of very practical knowledge about implementation and execution for what he does. And so all of his content is focused on very practical, very much like not high flying, you need to do this, it's important. It's here's how you do it. And it's very straightforward. There's not a lot of corporate speak. There's not a lot of fuzzy, wuzzy language. It's very practical, very applicable, and very actionable content. So, because that's what makes him different at what he does. So understanding that can help drive your tone, your message, and your approach. What are your competitors saying? We already talked about this. Who are you solving problems for? This is the most obvious piece of the puzzle, right? Who are you solving problems for? Get as specific as you can, right? Who are your sales reps usually talking to? Who do they have to convince? Who do the people that they talk to have to convince? Understand what they care about. And that feeds into what do they care about. And again, this is going to feed directly into the themes and the topics that you're going to put on that calendar. So for example, let's talk about a CEO or a CFO. They might need or want to understand content that shows an ROI. Like, what's the ROI of fixing this problem for your organization? An operations manager might be more interested in how they can get more done faster. A safety manager cares about reducing incidents and compliance. Ideally, you ask your customers these questions during those customer interviews. What are they measured on? What's top of mind? When you break it down by persona, even at a super quick and dirty level, I know you can pay tens of thousands of dollars to companies to do this for you, but even at a quick and dirty level, it's going to give you a much clearer path when you're trying to identify topics for your content plan. The last question is, who is your priority in 2025? You probably have, a dozen different markets that you're reaching, right? But there's probably one or two markets or one or two areas that your business wants to prioritize and support in 2025. Start there. if you boil the ocean, you're not going to get very far. Your content will be all over the place. It'll be diluted. Focus in on the markets and the people that you want to reach, prioritize those, and then map out the next in line after that. And then map that, make sure you're putting that all in the calendar. So these are all, again, just part of building a content strategy. We have a lot more material on our website, including some downloadables that kind of go deeper into these topics, but these are all really important for understanding before you can build a longer term plan. All right, from all of this, we're going to identify themes. Okay, so based on what your target audience cares about, identify 3 to 5 big picture themes. And when I say big picture, I'm talking pretty big picture, right? I know I keep going back to maybe I'll skip the consultant. Let's talk about a CRM software company. A theme, some of the themes might be adoption, right? So adoption is a bigger picture theme under which you could put a lot of great specific topics, right? So when I'm talking about themes, I'm talking kind of a big umbrella that aligns with what your customers care about. And then make sure to get feedback on your team from that. Make sure that they resonate. Note that we're not going to start in building our content calendar or plan. At least this is not how I operate. We need to write 5 blog posts and then let's figure out topics for those. We're actually starting with the themes, moving to the topics for the pieces, and then figuring out the best way to get that info out. So topics, themes first, what do our customers care about and what kind of messaging and education do we need to put out there? And then what's the best way to get it out there? So for a theme, for example, let's say we're talking about a manufacturer. I'm not going to get much more specific than that. A CFO, maybe, if you're trying to reach a CFO, a few themes might be purchasing, aka like purchasing better, profitability, very big, very generic, but very big theme for a CFO. They care about the bottom line. Cash flow, that's different than profitability. They also care about that. A safety manager, compliance could be a big bucket. Again, this depends on your audience and who you're trying to reach, but compliance, safety culture, building safety culture, risk management. These are all big buckets, right? Under which you can identify several topics that you could talk about that might resonate with that safety manager. So topics first, content type second, again. That would be the next in line. Okay, so next, after you're identifying kind of themes, right? We're talking about topics. We'll kind of dive deeper here. CFO of a manufacturer. So here's some example topics. And again, it has to be based on your market. If it's a food and beverage manufacturer or a fasteners manufacturer, they might have slightly different, focuses, right? As a CFO or as a safety manager or as an operations manager, depending on who you're trying to reach. But here's some topics, for example, reducing the number of returns that they're making, consolidating suppliers, balancing just-in-time and safety stock, benefits of predictive maintenance and reducing downtime, the total cost of ownership for quality components. There's a lot of topics that you can see fall under profitability because there's a lot of things that can contribute to the profitability of a manufacturer. Safety manager, for example, topics under a compliance theme. OSHA compliance around equipment maintenance, regulatory updates for material handling, how to audit your workplace for safety, how PPE can help you maintain compliance, environmental compliance. There's a ton of things that you could talk about there, safe chemical handling, etc. I think the point that I want to make is when you're building a content plan and you're identifying content topics, you have to keep the focus on the customer, right? What they care about, not just about what you sell. If you don't have the expertise, find an expert. There's probably someone on your team that could talk about, multiple topics, but there's also people in the industry that would probably be excited to be featured on your blog or on your podcast or on a webinar. So think beyond your 4 walls. If you don't have the expertise on the inside to cover topics that maybe your customers could really benefit from, think outside those 4 walls. Don't let that stop you from integrating that into your content plan. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to go back to a CRM software provider. So if you sell CRM, and I know there's nobody on this call that does that, but it's an easy example to give. Make your content maybe about improving your customers' selling processes, right? Their selling effectiveness, rather than making every piece that you write about the software itself. So selling skills, the value of mentoring, better sales management, how sales reps can leverage data with really practical tips and helpful guidance, cross-departmental collaborating, whatever it is that sales teams struggle with, and they struggle with a lot in the industry you're targeting with, you'll talk about that instead rather than just CRM, right? For a distributor, it's, yes, people want to read about and see comparisons and understand the products that you're offering, but they also have interests and things that they're measured on and things that they struggle with beyond just the product. So make sure you're thinking big enough and you're keeping the customer in mind. What would they want to read about and what would be helpful to them? You know, you're trying to build trust that you understand them without trying to constantly sell. All right, let's look at some examples of content types, because now that we've identified themes, we've identified some examples of some topics. Let's look at content types. So one way to think of this is in the buyer's journey stages. Okay, so I understand that this is, again, grossly simplified, but I just don't want to overcomplicate things, right? We know that a buyer today goes, you know, they might become aware of you or aware of the problem that they have. Those are two different things, but they both fall in the awareness stage. And then they might go over here, and then they might go over here, and they might go back over here, and it could be a nice circular path, or not even a circular path. Okay, so they're not just saying, oh, I'm aware, oops, I'm going to consider, oops, I'm going to make a decide. We know that, but let's just think of it in this way, because I think this is going to give you kind of a mindset of making sure that you're creating a good mix of content that's going to hit the buyer wherever they are on the stage, in the stages of the buying journey. So your buyers need to see the same message multiple times in different formats. Many of your buyers probably prefer different formats. I'm not a big video girl, but a lot of people are. So video should be part of your mix. You know, I like to read, so longer articles, you know, helpful articles. You know, some people prefer to get a lot of their insight and information through a social feed, right, before they're going to go and explore you on your website. So ensuring that you have a nice mix of content and formats is really important. And then content and formats that meet each of these stages. So educational articles, social guides, let's see, for consideration, they want to see how companies like theirs are solving the problems they have. And then you want to make sure you're creating content that can help them make the decision they need to make to solve the problem they have. So content that can educate, content that can showcase how other companies are solving problems they have, and content that can help them make the decision. And those are three very different kinds of content. So when you're making your content plan, make sure that you're kind of mixing and matching there. Again, keep it simple. You know, if you overthink this a little bit, then you're probably gonna, it's really easy to create too complicated of a plan and not be able to execute it. So let's give some examples of types of content that might come out, some of the topics that we talked about. So let's talk about profitability, for example. So the topic of consolidating suppliers. You could do a blog post, obviously, for the website, probably multiple. You could do a sales sheet that's PDF and printable that features a cost-benefit analysis for the sales reps to share. That would fit the consideration stage. You could do an email campaign around the benefits of consolidating suppliers. It could be customized or it could be generic. You could do a PDF guide to evaluating your supplier base for opportunities to reduce costs. That would be awareness, but it'd be a really helpful tool probably. And you could do a case study of a customer that consolidated faster and spend with you. So what I'm kind of showing here is that this topic, consolidating suppliers, could be far more than just one article. It could touch, you could create content at every stage of the buyer's journey around this topic that could be helpful both for your customers, but also for your sales reps when they're talking to their customers. And I think I have a safety manager example too. So let's say the topic is auditing your workplace for safety. You could do a webinar. Webinars are great because they can be repurposed into clips for YouTube and social. You could do a blog post on the value of auditing your workplace and provide steps and checklists for doing so. You could have a downloadable checklist for safety managers. You could provide a series of tips on social media, whether that's via audio or copy, cool infographics, or you could do video clips. You could do a sales sheet on your safety audit services. That's a decision stage. And you could create a case study of a customer who did a safety audit with you. So as you can see, there's a lot of different parts and pieces that you could align with the topics that you're creating. This is not just about creating one article. It's about thinking more broadly about what's the type of content that would help the customer in every stage of the sales cycle and also help your team sell more effectively. So I hope that's helpful. So let's talk calendar. And I know I can't get super deep into any one thing, but I'm happy to jump on the phone call with anybody that wants to chat more about any one of these stages and share, the secret sauce. It's not that secret. I'm willing to share our experience with it and what's worked for us after this on a separate call. But hopefully this is at least giving you some ideas. So let's talk calendar. So this is just a screenshot of a simple spreadsheet. Honestly, that's my go-to for a big picture view. I know there are a million tools out there online that you can use, so please just do what's best for you. I prefer to have a spreadsheet, simple and clean for a quick glance, that's shareable and is kept up to date. As you can see on here, we plan by month. We always identify the content type, the title, any notes that need to be made, the target market, that's important, where in the buyer journey, not journal, that this falls, who the writer's going to be, who the reviewer's going to be, what the status is. And then when you're done, you can add the final link or location of that asset, and then you automatically have a content audit, right? You have a content library and everything's in one place. Again, there's a lot of tools out there. If you Google content calendar tools, you're going to find them, but I like to use a spreadsheet. I just like to have the big picture. It just might be my old school nature, but for me, that works. When you're planning out your calendar, I recommend, let's say we're talking about, let's talk about the safety audit. You could start by creating the really big guide on the safety audit and how it works and tips and tricks. And here's a checklist. And then you could then use that as the base or foundation for all future content, right? You could start big and then break it into all the other pieces you want to create, or you could create all the smaller pieces first and then take that and repurpose and update and flesh out and build that into a bigger guide. But just try to think efficiently like that. You don't have to you could create one piece first and then repurpose that into all the other pieces you want to create and add and change for other parts of the sales cycle. So when you're creating your calendar, make sure you're planning in that way so that, you're not trying to do it all at once. Do the big picture first and then break it in future months, break it down into other aspects. Hopefully that makes sense. We like to use Trello. That's a pretty common big project management tool. There's tons of project management tools out there. We use the spreadsheet as a quick master list, but we track everything in Trello, individual tasks, and you can also view it in multiple different ways. This is not a webinar about tools. But as you can see, there's so many different ways to organize and leverage some of these tools to keep content flowing, to keep people in the loop, to track where things are at. I really recommend using or looking into those tools. And again, I'd be happy to jump on the phone with someone and talk through a little bit more specifically how we're using it. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we don't just use spreadsheets. We actually fully and completely use Trello to keep track of everything that's moving for our clients and for our own business. All right, so let's talk a little bit about time frame, right? Everything that I'm talking about that I've kind of rushed through is a lot of things, right? So how do you know how much to do and how quickly and what that time frame is? Honestly, it has to do with resources, time, availability. Some things are going to take longer than, like a case study always for some reason takes us much, much longer than we expect. A blog might just take a couple of weeks to put together, depending on the experts that have to be involved, right? So I think my recommendation for time frame is start small and build. Don't try to do everything at once. So if you want to, you could start with, let's do a profitability theme for CFOs of food and beverage manufacturers, and let's build out those 5 content pieces that we need. And then those will be done. And then let's move on to the next, theme and topic for safety managers. And let's focus on building an entire set of content around safety audits. So that could be one way you do that. Just give yourself time, right? That's probably a quarter's worth of work if you have a small team. Be reasonable. It's probably not going to be done in 4 weeks. You could also work on multiple themes at a time, right? And drip out a little bit of content for each over time. 2 or 3. Don't go crazy. Just remember that every piece of content you create should have a purpose. But whatever you do, find a system that works for you and move forward. If you're a one-man team, if you have limited resources, start with just one article and some smaller repurposed pieces every month and just build from there. I mean, even by doing that, you should have a great little library, at the end of 12 months. Even 12 relevant, valuable pieces are still going to be better than just a bunch of generic stuff that comes out, right? Just so that you can have content on the site. If every piece of content you create has a purpose, a smaller library is going to be more effective for you than a massive library of generic stuff. I was going to say crap, but I didn't think that would sound good. If every piece of content has value, you're going to be great, whether you have 5 pieces or 20 pieces. All right. So, the other piece that I was going to say is make sure that when you're building a content plan, that you're also building a plan for the resources that you need to actually execute on the content plan. So identify a writer or producer, whether that's an in-house or an out-house or a combination out-house, outsourced. Whether that's in-house or outsourced, make sure you're identifying who's going to create all this content, and don't put too much on yourself. Marketers always think, even though they're being stretched in 500 directions already, I'll just go ahead and write that, or I'll have the subject matter expert, I'll let Johnny sales rep, who's an expert in X, he'll write it. Maybe 1 or 2, but we've seen that tried and it's a challenge, right? Like they have another job. So ideally you can find a writer or a producer, a content specialist in-house that could just focus on that for you, or you can partner with a business like 3 Aspens, and there's many of us out there. We happen to specialize in the distribution world, but finding a company that can support you as an extension of your team can be a great path if it's the right fit for you. We have an entire article on our website that gives you kind of questions and things that you can look at to determine if in-house or outsource is right for you. So really consider that, because having a dedicated person that's going to be overseeing this and who's actually going to be writing and producing the content or reviewing the content is going to go a long way to actually getting it done. Make sure you know who's going to review the content, who's going to provide input, who's going to approve it. Again, you need to know this, otherwise your content is just going to stall. And make sure you're providing very clear direction on what they're looking for, because if you're asking your technical specialist in safety to review a piece, and he's spending all his time, he or she is spending all their time trying to put commas in the right place, and we've seen this, right? They spend too much time on the grammar and the word choice, but not enough time on the actual content that they should be, like the accuracy and the thoroughness of the content as a helpful piece for the customers that you're trying to reach. Then that's just going to stall things, right? So you need to provide very clear direction on what their role is in the review process. You also need to avoid editing by committee. We've seen this a lot. The more people that you have involved, they all have a different point of view. They all care about different word choices. They all are going to have a different opinion about how things are put together. But the honest to God truth is that the marketing team is the one that has the content strategy and the plan in place. You have helped build this piece of content based on that plan. So their primary role, the people reviewing it, if they're not an editor, is just to make sure that it's hitting the mark and that it's accurate and that it's going to be helpful for the customer. Beyond that, word choice, angle, that sort of thing, that's on your plate. And the more people that you have involved, the slower the process is going to be. And again, it's going to end up stalled. So, identify maybe one expert to be your reviewer by subject area, and make sure that you have someone assigned to review things on the marketing side from a editing standpoint, making sure that it's clean and clear and whatnot. So I just had to get on my soapbox about that. And again, just make sure that you're starting small. So I kind of wanted to drive into, I want to address the elephant in the room. And I'm going to open that elephant up. The elephant in the room, AI. So AI can play big in a lot of the steps I mentioned today. And I'm sure that was a question on everyone's mind. So, what I want to kind of say is that human input in every one of these steps is super critical. Persona creation, theme and topic brainstorming, interview transcripts and summaries, article outlines, calendar creation, keyword research. I've used ChatGPT and other tools to kind of brainstorm and get ideas in each of these areas. It's a great way to kind of speed up that process and get an initial draft of something, right? When I say draft, I'm not talking about the actual article or actual piece, but for all those foundational items that you're going to need. But again, it's a starting point. It's a tool, right? Somebody I talked to as an AI expert, one of our clients said, think of it kind of like your intern. You'd never just take what they gave you and run with it, right? Keep the human as part of all of this. Maybe it's an initial, here's a persona of a CFO of a food and beverage manufacturer. Okay. Then talk to the people on your team who actually works with the CFO at the manufacturer. I don't know if they actually interact with the CFO directly, but you get the point, and get their take, right? Talk to that person, right, at the manufacturing, customer, and find out, does this track? Is this what you care about? Is this make sense? Like, check it with the human point of view, right? And then notice I don't have writing anywhere on here, right? What AI writes is average at best. And I'm not saying that just because, I'm biased. I'm a professional writer and editor. But right now, ChatGPT and other tools are literally writing an average output of what's out there already on the internet. It's not differentiated. It's not helpful, relevant, or valuable. It's not going to infuse your point of view. It's what customers can find on their own if they're looking, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't use it in the process, right? And I think it can be a valuable tool, and there's a lot of them out there when you're building a content plan and you're building a content strategy. But you have to be really careful because not everything AI produces is accurate, right? So always having an expert reviewing an outline or a list of ideas generated from one of those tools, they're going to know right away how useful the results are, and they can build on that. If someone doesn't know the topic and they're reviewing a list of ideas that come out of ChatGPT, if you asked it to create a content calendar for you, and they don't know the topic that well, they're not going to know that these 3 ideas that ChatGPT just spit out aren't relevant for the audience, or they're wrong, right? And that's the danger. So you just need to make sure that when you're leveraging these tools, and I'm all for leveraging these tools, that you're balancing AI's output with your expertise. So there's my statement on AI. And this is something I really believe in. So I think niche B2B content, whether you're a software company or distributor or manufacturer, it really does require more human care and attention, right? Because the cost of getting it wrong for you and your customers is so much higher. Asking ChatGPT to create a content plan and create content around the best camping spots in Colorado, pretty low risk for the customer if they're reading that and they're going to go and, check out a camping spot. But if it's, talking about maintaining a piece of equipment, that's a whole other can of worms. And you have to be really careful about that. So when you're building your content plan, just keep that in mind. All right. Common mistakes made in this process. First, too generic. Again, and I'm seeing this more and more, especially as people leverage AI to help generate ideas and help generate topics and help even write content. It just falls flat with the customer because it's being produced just for the sake of being produced. So when you're building your content plan, make sure that it's specific to the market that you're trying to reach. The examples I gave are pretty generic, but you can easily customize that, right? A safety audit in a food processing facility is going to be a lot more specific than just generically manufacturing. So make sure you're really getting specific and helpful for the specific customers that you want to talk to, and that takes more time and it takes more energy, and building a helpful library is gonna, again, take longer than if you just do a bunch of generic content, but it's also going to be more relevant and helpful for both your customers and your sales reps. Another mistake, it's not specific to the market or roles that you're targeting. I would say, again, that's similar to the first one that I mentioned, in that if you're too generic, then it's not going to resonate and it's just going to look like everything else out there. So just make sure that you're really speaking to their pain points when you're building up the content plan. Too salesy, I mentioned this before. If it's not about the customer and it's always about you and it's always about your product, unless the customer's in the decision phase, and most are not, most customers are not in the decision phase, they're not going to read it. They're just going to move on. Sales rep participation. This is a big one. If you are, whether software, consulting, distribution, manufacturing, all types of companies that we work with within this industry, if you're not involving the sales reps or the people that are actually working with the customers and need this content to support their efforts, if you're not working with them, you're not going to get buy-in from them. The content you create isn't going to be as relevant or as helpful. For one of our clients, we have weekly or bi-weekly regular calls. We rotate with sales reps on their team. It's a manufacturer, and it's been crazy useful in both getting their buy-in to actually use and leverage the content we're creating, but also topics and ideas to feed the content calendar that we're building. So keep that in mind. Have a regular touch point with those reps, because they matter in the effectiveness of what you're doing. Lack of agility in the process can be a common mistake. If you don't have the flexibility to shift gears, or the need or the ability to shift gears or move things around on the calendar, or extend the timeline for something, that can stall things. Leaning too heavily on AI, I already talked about that. I don't need to talk about that anymore. Just remember, balance AI with the human touch to make sure what you're creating is relevant and valuable for your customer. And then I already mentioned the too many reviewers part of the process. Editing by committee, that could be a really big mistake, and again, can stall content. It can move that content to a place where it wasn't originally intended to go. It can become too salesy. Just don't edit by committee. Yeah, so that is it. I was trying to fill 1 hour with a ton of content that could literally fill a book. So if you guys have any questions, we still have some time left. I would love to answer. If you want to just throw a question down in the chat, I'll give you a second or two and see if anybody has anything they want me to chat about or share. I'd be happy to. And if not, we'll close up early. So what I'll say, while just in case anyone's typing, 3 Aspens definitely, this is my 10-second sales pitch. We definitely help as part of our agreements and retainers and work we do with our clients. We do ongoing content strategy and content planning support like this. We always have a calendar in place, and we're constantly tweaking it to meet their needs and moving forward. So we definitely do this kind of support for our ongoing clients, but we also offer a service where we can come in and help your marketing team and actually help you build a content plan out together that you can execute on your own, or, if you need us to support you in, parts of the execution, we can do that as well. But sometimes just building the plan is, the challenge, and then figuring out a path to actually executing it. So we can come in and help you do that, that part of the process. Hey, Alex, thank you. Yes, great question. I kind of skipped that slide in part of my presentation. We actually have several templates. Oh, sorry, I'll ask the question out loud so that people who are listening and can understand it. So Alex asks, how do you provide guidance or direction to in-house or outsourced writers in terms of sticking to the content themes? Yes, thank you for asking that. Again, I skipped that because I was running out of time. One, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And this is, it's called a content brief. And, this is just one example, right? But we have some templates, content briefs that we put together that include all of the information that we were just talking about, right? So one of the things you could add to this is the bucket or the theme that the topic falls under. So you have, what's the type of content, who's writing it, when you need it, all the things. What kind of content is it? What is the topic? And that's where you would kind of talk about exactly what you were just talking about. If there's keyword phrases that we need to include, that's where this goes. Who are we targeting with this content? If possible, type of content and role in this company, specify stage of the buying process. This is kind of where you talk about who are we writing this for, and provide any information. Ideally, you're working with writers or producers that either you work with on an ongoing basis or have some level of knowledge of your business and the customers that you're reaching, so that you're not fully educating them on every new piece. But this is where you would put this target right here. Content goal, again, that's, we like to explain, oh, this is just an educational piece, or this is something that needs to demonstrate how they're, maybe it's a case study or a use case or something like that, where we're trying to, the goal is just to demonstrate how other customers are doing, solving this problem. So that gives them that context. Outline or summary. Hey, here's the key points we need to make sure we're including and why. Here's the resources that you're going to need. You need to talk to X, Y, and Z, and you need to, here's some past content they've done on this topic. Oh, and this sales rep will be really important to talk to. Here's some constraints. That's, here's expectations, tone. So as you can see, you can put whatever you want on this, but it's a nice kind of just everything in one place. And I think that is a good starting place. But I'm also a really big fan of actually having a call with the writer and going through the topic and reviewing what's going to happen and letting them play a big part in the outline process and the interview process as well. So they're deeply involved. Yeah. So I'm happy to share this with you, Alex, and anybody else that wants. And I believe we have a number of resources on our website that can help you don't know if a content brief is or not. I'll check, but I'm happy to share some of that as well. I know everybody on this call right now that's live. So, if you want to shoot me an email, I'm at lindsay@aspensmedia.com. I'm happy to email you a link to any of the resources we have on our site, both content calendar, content briefs, content persona stuff. We have a lot of things that you could leverage in this process. Thank you, Terry. Terry just shared it in the chat. I appreciate that, Terry. That's the link. That's where all of our downloads are. And if you're looking for anything else that's not on there, let me know. I'm happy to share it. Any other questions today, guys? I covered a lot of ground. I wish I could go deeper and more specific into some of these areas. But again, if you want to, you're free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help with anything or have a call. Just if you want to bounce ideas off me, I'm happy to do that as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you on the next webinar.